The alien ship's corridors stretched out like veins, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light that pulsed in rhythm with an unseen heart. Every step Commander Wyatt Voss took reverberated through the silence, swallowed by the strange organic material beneath his boots. The rest of the landing team followed him in tense silence, their breaths audible in the filtered air of their suits. This was no ordinary derelict. Wyatt had seen his share of dead ships, relics from forgotten wars or failed colonies, but this vessel was different. It felt alive, and it was ancient, far older than anything humanity had ever encountered. "Commander," Lieutenant Alana Drake said, her voice sharp over the comms, "we've got motion on the scanners." "Specified," Wyatt replied, keeping his gaze locked forward. Drake checked her wrist display, her brow furrowing. "Not clear. It's faint, like ripples in the air. Might be environmental distortion, but it's too consistent." "Stay alert," Wyatt said, his tone clipped. "Martinez, take point." Ensign Martinez moved forward, his pulse rifle raised, its mounted light casting jittering beams across the curved walls. The group pressed on, navigating the labyrinthine corridors as if the ship itself was luring them deeper into its core. The signal, the one they'd been chasing for weeks, was louder here, a relentless thrum that Wyatt could feel vibrating in his chest. It wasn't just sound, it was something deeper, resonating in his very bones. They reached the central chamber after what felt like hours of walking. The room was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows. Strange, root-like structures descended from above, twisting and coiling like petrified vines. In the center of the chamber stood the vault, a massive spherical structure covered in glyphs that shimmered faintly in the dim light. "This is it," Wyatt said, his voice barely above a whisper. Drake stepped forward, her eyes scanning the vault with apprehension. "The readings are off the charts, Commander. Whatever's in there, it's powerful." "Maybe too powerful," Isaac grimaced. His muscles ached, with slight cracks impenetrable. "That's why we're here," Wyatt said. He approached the vault, his hand grazing the surface. It was warm to the touch, and the glyphs flared brightly at his contact, casting the room in a kaleidoscope of alien light. "Wait!" Drake called out, stepping closer. "We should analyze this first. If you open it without knowing what's inside..." Wyatt turned to face her, his expression hard. "We've come too far to hesitate now. If you're scared, stand back." Drake bristled but said nothing. She stepped away, though her hand remained close to her weapon. "Politeness." Wyatt placed his hand fully against the vault's surface. The glyphs began to shift, rearranging themselves in a sequence that defied logic. A low rumble filled the chamber, and the vault door slowly slid open, revealing what lay within. The sphere. Inside the vault was a sphere suspended in midair, blacker than the void itself. It pulsed with a faint, otherworldly energy, its surface rippling like liquid glass. Wyatt approached it cautiously, his eyes locked on the artifact. He could see his reflection in its surface, warped and distorted, as though the sphere was peering into his very soul. "Commander," Martinez said nervously, his grip tightening on his rifle, "I don't think we should be here." Wyatt snapped, his voice tinged with awe. He extended a hand toward the sphere, feeling a pull that was almost magnetic. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy shot through him. His vision blurred, the room around him dissolving into a cascade of light and sound. He saw flashes, images that made no sense, a city made of towering spires crumbling into ash, a sky filled with black ships blotting out the stars, a figure, tall and indistinct, reaching out toward him with hands that glowed like suns. Wyatt staggered back, gasping for air. The sphere pulsed again, brighter this time, as though responding to his touch. "What the hell was that?" Drake demanded, rushing to his side. Wyatt steadied himself, his face pale but determined. "It's a map," he said. "Coordinates to something bigger." Drake stared at him, her expression a mix of fear and disbelief. "You don't know that. That thing could be showing you anything. It could be a warning." "It's not a warning," Wyatt said firmly. "It's a key." Before anyone could respond, the ship began to shake. The walls pulsed violently, the blue light flickering like a failing heartbeat. Martinez cursed, his eyes darting around the chamber. "Commander, we've got to get out of here," he shouted. Wyatt didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the sphere, which now glowed with an intensity that filled the entire room. He could hear it calling to him, a low, melodic hum that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his mind. "Sir?" Drake yelled, grabbing his arm. "We need to leave, now." Reluctantly, Wyatt tore his gaze away from the sphere. "Fine," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "But we're not leaving without it." "You can't be serious," Drake said. "We don't even know what it is." "I know enough," Wyatt snapped. "It's the reason we're here. Secure it, and let's move." Martinez and another crew member, Specialist Juno, approached the sphere with a containment unit. As they worked to detach it from its suspension field, the shaking intensified. The ship seemed to groan, a deep, resonant sound that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. "Move faster," Wyatt barked. Finally, the sphere was sealed within the containment unit. The team began their retreat, navigating the trembling corridors as debris rained down around them. The ship seemed to be collapsing in on itself, its organic walls splitting open to reveal a churning darkness beneath. As they reached the docking bay, the motion scanners flared to life. This time the readings were unmistakable. "Something's coming," Martinez said, his voice shaking. "Keep moving," Wyatt ordered. Behind them, the shadows seemed to coalesce, forming shapes that defied comprehension. Eyes, dozens of them, glowing like embers, appeared in the darkness, accompanied by a guttural chittering sound that made their stomachs churn. "Open fire," Drake shouted, her rifle on her right hip supporting her body as she hustled toward the prow. Reluctantly, she drew her weapon. The team unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, the light illuminating the horrors pursuing them. The creatures were amorphous, shifting and writhing like living smoke. The plasma rounds tore through them, but they reformed almost instantly, surging forward with terrifying speed. "Go! Go!" Wyatt yelled, covering the team as they boarded the shuttle. As soon as they were inside, Wyatt slammed his hand on the console. "Launch! Now!" Launch. The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling them out of the collapsing ship. Behind them, the alien vessel imploded, folding in on itself, until it was nothing more than a pinprick of light. And then, even that was gone. The shuttle docked with the black ship, and the crew stumbled out, their suits covered in ash and ichor. Wyatt carried the containment unit himself, his grip tight, as though he feared it might disappear if he let go. In the medbay, Drake cornered him. "You risked all our lives for that thing," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You don't even know what it is. And you almost got us killed. Be careful." Wyatt set the containment unit down, his expression unreadable. "I know exactly what it is," he said. "It's our future." Drake stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You've lost it, haven't you? That thing is dangerous, Wyatt. We should destroy it before it destroys us." Wyatt stepped closer, his gaze icy. "Don't get in my way, Alana. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. If you can't see that, then maybe you don't belong on this ship." Drake held his stare for a long moment before shaking her head and walking away. Wyatt watched her go, his jaw clenched. Then he turned back to the containment unit, his hand resting on its surface. "Whatever you are," he murmured, "you're mine now." The sphere pulsed faintly, as though in response. Wyatt smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. The black ship's shuttle descended toward the alien vessel, its engines humming with a low, steady growl. Outside, the shattered planetary cluster loomed, a swirling graveyard of asteroids and debris, bathed in the pale light of a dying star. The alien wreckage stood out like a dark jewel, its massive, organic structure unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Inside the shuttle, Commander Wyatt Voss stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the vessel ahead. The faint hum of the signal sound, the same one that had drawn them across uncharted space, vibrated through his skull. It wasn't just noise. It was something alive, pulsing with intent. He clenched his jaw, his gloved hand tightening on the railing. Volumner smiled inside the lockers. "Final approach in 30 seconds, said Specialist Juno, seated at the controls. Her voice was calm, but Wyatt could see the tension in her eyes as she scanned the debris field. "Keep it steady," Wyatt replied, his voice clipped. He turned to the rest of the team. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there, but remember your training. Stick together, follow orders, and we'll make it back in one piece." Lieutenant Alana Drake nodded, her face set in grim determination. "Understood, sir." "Martinez, check your scanner. Any signs of activity?" Wyatt asked. "Perfect, Senator." Ensign Martinez glanced at his wrist mount display, frowning. "Nothing solid, just background noise. Could be interference from the ship, or something else." Wyatt's gaze hardened. "Stay sharp. If there's anything down there, I want to know before it knows about us." "Ah!" The shuttle jolted as it docked with the alien vessel, its landing clamps locking onto the warped metallic surface. Wyatt took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "Let's move," he ordered, stepping toward the airlock. The airlock hissed open, revealing the alien ship's interior. The walls glistened with a strange, organic sheen, as if they were alive. A faint blue glow pulsed through the corridors, casting eerie shadows that danced with each step the team took. "Atmosphere's thin but breathable," Juno reported, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Radiation levels are manageable for now." Wyatt nodded, his helmet lights cutting through the dimness. "Stay together. This ship is old, but we can't assume it's dead." The corridors twisted and turned, narrowing and widening at irregular intervals. The architecture, or biology, of the vessel was unlike anything they'd seen. It felt less like a machine and more like a living organism, its walls pulsating faintly with the signal. "This doesn't feel right," Martinez muttered, his rifle at the ready. "It's too quiet." "Keep your focus," Drake said sharply. "If something's here, we'll deal with it." "What do we do?" As they moved deeper into the ship, the signal grew stronger, a relentless thrum that seemed to echo in their very bones. Wyatt could feel it pulling him forward, a magnetic force that refused to be ignored. They reached a junction where the walls opened into a massive chamber. The team froze, their lights sweeping across the space. The chamber was filled with structures resembling stalagmites, each one carved with intricate glyphs that glowed faintly. "Today. What the hell is this place?" Juno whispered. "An archive, maybe," Drake suggested, her voice tinged with unease. Wyatt didn't respond. His attention was fixed on the far end of the chamber, where a massive spherical object hovered in midair. It was the source of the signal. There was no doubt in his mind. The sphere's surface rippled like liquid glass, its blackness absorbing the light and reflecting nothing. "That's it," Wyatt said, his voice low. "That's what we came for." The team approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the strange, spongy material beneath them. The sphere was encased in what looked like a protective shell, its surface covered in more glowing glyphs that shifted and rearranged themselves as they neared. "This thing is putting out more energy than anything I've ever seen," Martinez said, his scanner beeping wildly. "It's off the charts." "Commander," Drake said, her tone serious, "we need to analyze this before we touch it. If it's a power source or a weapon, it could be unstable." Wyatt ignored her, stepping closer to the sphere. He could feel its pull, an almost physical force that seemed to call to him. The glyphs on the shell flared brighter as he reached out, his gloved hand brushing against them. "Commander, stop!" Drake shouted, but it was too late. The glyphs rearranged themselves in a cascading sequence, and the shell began to open with a deep, resonant hum. The team stepped back, their weapons raised, as the sphere was revealed in full. It floated in midair, its surface impossibly smooth and dark, like a fragment of the void itself. Wyatt stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached for the sphere. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, blinding and deafening. He saw visions, impossible, incomprehensible images flashing through his mind in rapid succession. A city of crystalline spires, shattering into 1,000 shards as an unseen force tore it apart. A sky filled with black ships, their massive forms blotting out the stars as they unleashed torrents of destruction. A figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowing like twin suns, reaching out toward him. And then a map, a swirling cascade of stars and coordinates, leading to something vast and unknowable. Wyatt gasped, stumbling backward as the visions faded. His heart raced, his chest heaving as he struggled to regain his composure. "Commander!" Drake was at his side, her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" Wyatt shook his head, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. It's a map," he said. "A path to something bigger." Drake stared at him, her expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "A map? You don't know that. That thing could have just scrambled your brain for all we know." "I know what I saw," Wyatt snapped. "This is it. This is what we've been searching for." Before anyone could argue further, the ship began to shake. The walls pulsed violently, the blue light flickering like a failing heartbeat. A low, guttural sound echoed through the chamber, sending a chill down their spines. "We need to move," Juno shouted, her voice rising above the noise. "Martinez, secure the sphere," Wyatt ordered. Martinez and Juno scrambled to lift the sphere into a containment unit. Their movements hurried as the tremors grew stronger. The glyphs on the walls began to flare and shift, as if the ship itself was waking up. "Commander, I don't think the ship likes what we're doing," Drake said, her tone sharp. "We're not leaving without it," Wyatt said firmly. "Get it secured, and let's go." As soon as the sphere was sealed, the team began their retreat, navigating the twisting corridors as debris rained down around them. The walls seemed to close in, the organic material warping and writhing like a wounded creature. "Contact!" Martinez shouted, raising his rifle. From the shadows, shapes emerged, twisting, amorphous forms that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, accompanied by a chittering sound that made their stomachs churn. Plasma rounds tore through the air, illuminating the creatures for brief moments. They were like living smoke, their forms constantly shifting and reforming as they surged forward. "Move, move!" Wyatt shouted, covering the team as they ran. The shuttle came into view, its ramp already lowered. The team sprinted aboard, firing behind them as the creatures closed in. "Launch now!" Wyatt barked, slamming his fist on the console. The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling them out of the alien ship just as it began to collapse in on itself. The vessel imploded, folding into a single point of light before vanishing entirely. Back aboard the black ship, the team collapsed in the med bay, their suits scorched and their faces pale. The containment unit sat in the center of the room, its surface glowing faintly. "You risked all our lives for that thing," Drake said, her voice shaking with anger as she confronted Wyatt. "You don't even know what it is." "I know enough," Wyatt said, his tone cold. "It's our future." Drake glared at him, her hands clenched into fists. "And if it destroys us, was it worth it?" Wyatt stepped closer, his eyes hard. "This isn't just about us. This is bigger than anything you or I can imagine. If you can't see that, then maybe you shouldn't be here." Drake stared at him for a long moment before shaking her head and walking away. Wyatt watched her go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the containment unit, his hand resting on its surface. "Whatever you are," he murmured, "you're mine now." The sphere pulsed faintly as if in response. Wyatt smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. The black ship orbited the shattered planetary cluster like a predator circling its prey. In its cargo bay, the containment unit holding the alien sphere pulsed faintly, casting long shadows across the dimly lit chamber. Commander Wyatt Voss stood a few feet away, his hands clasped behind his back. His gaze was fixed on the sphere as if it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of will. The silence of the room was broken by the sound of the bay doors hissing open. Lieutenant Ilana Drake entered, her boots clicking against the floor. She stopped a few paces behind Wyatt, her expression tight. "You haven't left this room in hours," she said. "The crew's starting to talk." "They can talk all they want," Wyatt replied without turning around. "This is why we came here. This is the reason for everything." Drake stepped closer, crossing her arms. "You think that thing is the answer? It nearly killed us back there. And it'll save us," Wyatt shot back, his voice hard. "You didn't see what I saw. You didn't feel it." "You're right, I didn't," Drake said, her tone sharp. "And maybe that's a good thing. Whatever that sphere is, it's not meant for us. It's alien, Wyatt. We can't control it." Wyatt finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Control isn't the point. Understanding is. That sphere is a key to something greater, a power we've only dreamed of." "And what if it's a Pandora's box?" Drake asked. "What if opening it destroys us?" Wyatt's lips thinned. "Then we make sure it doesn't. I'm not walking away from this, Ilana. Not now." Drake stared at him, frustration and something close to pity flickering in her eyes. "Just don't let it cost you everything," she said quietly before turning and leaving the room. Hours later, Wyatt gathered a team of scientists in the ship's laboratory. The sphere sat on a reinforced pedestal, its surface shimmering faintly under the harsh lights. Beside it, holographic displays projected streams of data collected during their initial scans. "This isn't just a power source," said Dr. Ethan Rowe, the ship's lead scientist. He gestured to the data. "It's emitting a signal, a highly complex one. It's like a language, but we can't decode it." "Not yet," Wyatt said, his voice firm, "but we will." Rowe hesitated. "Commander, there's something else. The signal. It's not just transmitting outward. It's also pulling something in." "Repeat after me," he said, ready for her answer. The light commanded, tapped his head, and wrote faster in his diary. The light kept penetrating, repeatedly penetrating the darkness. "What do you mean?" Wyatt asked, narrowing his eyes. "The sphere is interacting with the ship," Rowe explained. "It's using our systems to amplify its signal. If we don't isolate it, it could override our controls." "Can you stop it?" Wyatt asked. "For now," Rowe said. "But whatever this thing is, it's alive, in a way. It's adapting to us." Wyatt glanced at the sphere, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Do what you need to do to keep it contained," he said, "but don't stop studying it. Every answer brings us closer to understanding." Rowe nodded reluctantly and turned back to his instruments. Wyatt remained staring at the sphere, as if daring it to challenge him. Admit it? Later that night, Wyatt was awakened by the ship's emergency alarms. The harsh red glow of the alert lights filled his quarters, and the comm panel on his desk crackled to life. "Commander, we have a situation in the lab," Drake's voice said, tight with urgency. Wyatt was already moving, pulling on his jacket as he headed for the door. "What happened?" he demanded. "The sphere," Drake replied. It's doing something." When Wyatt arrived at the lab, he found chaos. The air was thick with the hum of overloaded equipment, and several scientists were clustered near the door, their faces pale with fear. Inside, the sphere pulsed violently, its glow filling the room with a harsh, otherworldly light. The glyphs on its surface were shifting rapidly, too fast for the eye to follow. "What's going on?" Wyatt barked. And then he recognized her. Rowe looked up, his face drenched in sweat. "It's breaking through the containment field. We don't know how, but it's reaching out." "Shut it down," Wyatt ordered. "Now." "We've tried," Rowe said, panic in his voice. "It's overriding our systems faster than we can compensate. It's like it's alive." Wyatt pushed past him, stepping into the room despite Drake's shout of warning. He could feel the sphere's energy coursing through the air, prickling against his skin. "You want to reach out?" he muttered under his breath. "Fine, let's see what you have to say." He placed his hand on the containment unit, ignoring the burning sensation that shot through his arm. The moment he made contact, the room dissolved around him. Wyatt found himself standing in a vast, featureless void. Above him, stars burned in unfamiliar constellations, and beneath his feet was nothing but empty space. In the distance, a figure appeared, tall, cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowing like twin suns. "You've come far," the figure said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to echo from every direction. "Further than most." "Who are you?" Wyatt demanded. "What is this?" "I am a fragment," the figure replied, "a remnant of those who came before. What you hold is a key, a gateway to knowledge and power beyond your understanding." "Then tell me how to use it," Wyatt said, stepping closer. The figure tilted its head as if studying him. "The key does not grant power freely. It must be earned, and the cost is steep." "What cost?" Wyatt asked. The figure did not answer directly. Instead, it raised a hand, and the void around them shifted. Wyatt saw flashes of destruction, worlds consumed by fire, cities reduced to ash, and ships like the Black Ship falling into darkness. "Power is a burden," the figure said. "It consumes as much as it creates. Are you prepared to bear it?" Wyatt clenched his fists. "I didn't come this far to turn back." The figure nodded, and the vision faded. Wyatt awoke on the floor of the lab, gasping for breath. The sphere's glow had subsided, and the room was quiet except for the hum of the ship's systems. Drake and Rose stood over him, their expressions a mix of concern and suspicion. "What happened?" Drake demanded. Wyatt sat up, rubbing his temples. "It communicated with me," he said. "It's a key, just like I thought. But it's more than that. It's a test." "A test for what?" Drake asked, her tone wary. "For what comes next," Wyatt said. He stood, his gaze hardening. "We're closer than ever, but we have to be ready. Whatever this thing unlocks, it's going to change everything." Rowe exchanged a glance with Drake, his unease clear. "Commander, this is dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with." "We're dealing with the future," Wyatt said, "and I'm not letting it slip through our fingers." Drake stared at him, her jaw tightening. "Just don't let your obsession get us all killed." Wyatt didn't respond. He turned back to the sphere, his reflection distorted on its surface. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back.